What is up, everyone? Today I'm going to be jumping into a full demo of how I draw scenes from imagination. First of all, I'm going to be running through some key concepts that I use in trying to draw my box mannequins in a scene. And then also, I'm going to take all of this information, all of the key scenes, and I'm going to jump into a live demo walking us step by step through my thought process, how I'm utilizing these different concepts as I draw my scene from imagination. So recently I've been jumping into making sure that I do a lot more of these because I actually want to be able to draw scenes. Like, this is one of my end goals, right? And so I've been working on this over some time, and some of the concept here, some of them are basic and some of them are more complicated. So if you are still struggling after this video, just know that it takes a lot of practice. It's taken me quite a bit of practice, or you may be one of those persons who catch on to things very easily. Anyway, let's start jumping into some of these key concepts before we jump into the demo. And I am not even sure exactly what I'm going to draw in that demo as yet. So we will find out together, and hopefully this goes well. Okay, so when it comes to setting up scenes from imagination, one of the key concepts in getting depth in your drawing is this first one here, and that's focusing on the size. Now, one of the things you need to realize is that without even setting up any hierarchy, things that are larger appear to be closer to you than things that are smaller. And this is one of the key things that you need to pay attention to. Make sure, like for example, in these scenes, as you're going back into the scene, things are getting smaller and smaller as you go backwards. It will set up a nice natural depth. Another thing that I think about is in terms of setting up the top planes of the object as they go back in space. So you will notice here that our first box, you're almost looking directly down on it, so that's pretty square. As you go back, the angle changes and you see less and less of the top of the box as it goes back away from you towards the horizon line. One of the other ways to think about this, it works exactly the same if you're looking on the underside of an object. The same thing, the underside plane, you'll see less and less of it as it goes further and further away from you. And of course, this is provided that it is at the same angle. Even though these are at all the same angle, laying flat on the floor, you still see less and less of the top of the object as it goes back away from you. Another key thing that I'm going to be thinking about as I go through the demo are details. One of the things is naturally our eyes are drawn to detail. So we want to make sure that whatever our focal point is, whether it's something in the foreground or something in the midground, or I don't think rarely we have people wanting to focus on the background. However, wherever you want the audiences or the viewers focus to go, that is where you're going to be adding details to that part of the image. So keep that in mind. If you put details everywhere, it's going to be a little bit crowded. So you want to make sure that you are leaving some details out. So you notice here in the foreground, this is a pretty detailed box mannequin. Some of the details get left out on these, and all the way in the back, basically just doing contours. And the same thing exists in these images. We lose detail as we go back. This part probably still has too much detail, and then it starts getting a little muddy here. So that's something, again, still working on these processes as well and continuing to practice them, but something you need to be aware of. Another thing is line weight, which is pretty self-explanatory. Darker or bolder line weights really pull something forward into view. Lighter line weights are something further away from you. Overlap is another key component of drawing scenes from imagination and setting up that depth. Overlap really tells you what's in front, one thing in front of another. Between overlap and size, these are really key details in terms of setting up your scene from imagination. If I was to put a third so far, it would be the top plane turning away from you as you are drawing back into the scene and adding depth. Another one, and this is one that gets a little bit tricky, especially if you're not used to rotating boxes as yet. And I do have a video on that that's been getting pretty good reviews. It's a simplified version of thinking on how to turn the box. But in a lot of my drawings, I'm not thinking so much of a key vanishing point, like, oh, this is a 1 point, this is a 2 point, this is a 3 point. I am kind of doing a little bit of a shorthand on these, where the more important thing for me is where is the horizon line, which sometimes I am also kind of estimating and not actually drawing a horizon line. So I'm thinking of it as if the horizon line is up here and the box is slightly turned, then I know that my lines need to converge this way and this way. If it's straight, like I'm just assuming that a horizon is here, and as my box twists, I am reorienting the vanishing points for that object in the scene. So I'm thinking more, like I said, again, the horizon line more than the vanishing points. And in thinking about this, if you are still struggling to even put a box in perspective, one of the ways I really think about it is which side is closest to me, and that line on the plane should be one of the longer lines, right? So for these boxes that I am drawing here, this portion is closer to me than this portion. So this line should be longer than this line. The same thing here. Which of these lines are closer to me? This part is closer, so it's probably a little bit longer. But really, when you have those that really show the distance from you, those really need to be, the size difference between them really needs to be pronounced. So, and I know there I know there are caveats around it. Every time I do try to do a simplified explanation, I always get all the comments about, well, that depends on how you're doing this. I understand. There are a lot of caveats here, but in general, what I'm thinking about is this side closer to me? It needs to be longer, the other side shorter. You connect them up and it begins to get you in the ballpark, okay? So if I have, let's say, just a simple plane and the top is closer to me, then the bottom is shorter. You have a plane that appears that it's going away from you, right? If you do it the other way around, you get a totally different effect, right? So something to think about if you're still struggling. Maybe I should just do a whole simplified video on some of these concepts, just to simplify it in your mind. Again, we're not going for perfection here. We're just going for kind of a good idea of something that represents what we're doing. Like, for instance, some of these boxes aren't exactly correct after I drew them and wasn't really paying close attention to what I was doing. I messed up on that one, but it's okay. There are some other miscellaneous issues that you will run into that are not covered in these key ideas. Um, Things like grounding objects on the floor as they get further away, how far they are away, whether you should be hiding the bottom. A lot of times it's better to actually show it touching the ground to get a grasp, to get a really good grip of how far things are away from each other on the floor, things like that. There are a lot of other issues you can run into in terms of trying to draw things into perspective. But I think these key ones here are really the things that I pay attention the most to and use a lot in drawing and setting up scenes like these. So, having said all that, I'm going to jump into a demo here, and as we go through the demo, I'll talk about when I'm using these different ideas and how they show up, what I'm thinking as I go through it. Okay, so we have a brand new page. The first thing I do when I have a blank page and I'm about to start drawing is you need to figure out where your horizon line is because this dictates everything for the rest of the drawing. For me, I'm going to do a similar drawing to those I did previously. So my horizon line is going to be right at the top of the image, somewhere around here. And this is going to go straight across. And so I am also choosing, if you remember from horizon lines, if you have persons in a shot, wherever the body part of that person lines up on the horizon line, all of the body parts should line up there. So if if I draw someone's head in the foreground that is right next to the horizon line, every person of that same height, if they're all sitting or all standing, they should also all line up around that same horizon line, no matter how far or near they are. The same thing if it's a lower horizon line and it cuts through someone's waist, then everybody's waist should be going through the horizon line. And so what I'm going to be doing for this layout, um, the the head for the person who is seated, everyone will be seated. I think uh, will be just slightly lower than the horizon line. So in my case, everybody's head will be just slightly lower than the horizon line. And also keeping in mind that as I move away from the horizon line, I will be seeing more and more of the top plane of that person. And as I get closer, I'm seeing less of the top plane, unless, of course, if the person is looking downwards, then I will see more of the top plane. So, with those ideas in mind, I have my horizon, I have where my person's body parts are going to be lining up in relation to the horizon, and also keeping in mind um, the top plane and how much of the top plane I will see. And the amount of the top plane of the objects I will see will decrease as I go up here, and they'll increase as I come this way down the page. So an object down here, I will see quite a bit of the top plane. And up here, closer to the horizon, if there happens to be a table or something with people seated around, I will almost be seeing that table flat on, and we'll see that later on if I as I get into the drawing. So I'm gonna get into it, and I'll be back with you all just in a second. Okay, so as you can see, we've got a few items here in the foreground, getting ready to go. I probably should have warmed up before I did this. This is my first drawing for the day, coming back to complete this video. Started out a little bit rocky, but I think we have some items now set for the foreground. So as you can see, I'm starting to lay in some of the more heavier line weights to really pull things forward and let other things go back. Using that a lot around the forms, the edges of those objects, and you'll see it start coming out more. I put quite a bit of detail in this scene so far, and if you are watching straight through, things look a little weird until you start adding in a lot of things, a lot more detail. One of the things that I have constantly continued to tell myself when doing these drawings is to give it some time. Put a little bit more into it. What I have found is that when I start out, I tend to not like how things are going. And this has been almost a constant for me doing these drawings. And as I add more things and more objects and more detail, then things start coming together slowly. Now there are a lot of mistakes and stuff like that in this drawing, but overall it still kind of has the feel that they're all around this table doing different things. This person is on their computer, this one's reaching over here doing something, and we're going to add a little bit more in here. So let's look at some of the key takeaways that we've talked about so far. This laptop here is on the table, but again, I am not so much concerned of setting it firmly on the table other than trying to make sure that these convergence points are kind of going towards this imaginary horizon line that is somewhere up here. As you notice, I'm not being completely strict with this, but once it's converging there, it will seem to be flat on the table. The same thing with these papers that I have put on the table. Once, this side is closer to the horizon, so it's further away. Once I am keeping this side a little bit longer and kind of having those lines somewhat converging in this direction, it seems like it's flat on the desk and it sits down and it lays down. Same thing with the papers on the floor, and I've found just throwing a few things on the floor, on the table, really just kind of make the floor a little bit more solid. With the chairs and everything, again, we're going towards the horizon in terms of where our vanishing point will be for this specific object. Now, one of the things that you will also need to take into consideration for things that are cylinders is you're taking into consideration how much of the top plane of other objects you're seeing, and that should help inform you of how much of the top of the cylinder you should see or how round you should make it versus how oval and flattened it should be. So again, that takes some practice, but you're eyeballing it. It's not going to be perfect. If I'm looking at these, I would be thinking, man, I should have probably opened up the cylinders on these two objects even just a little bit more. But again, it doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm hoping the more I do this, the more practice I get at it, the better it will be. Now, one of the things that I will point out that is probably a major mistake, but I just kind of flowed with it, and this is kind of what you do in these drawings. If these heads are this close to the horizon, I should be seeing much less of the top planes of these heads. And the same with the table. It's pretty close. I don't have much space in between here. And so really this horizon line is probably a bit further away. But again, once I made this decision point, I just kind of kept everything else as consistent as possible to the first objects I started to draw. Also ran into a situation here where this person is kind of sitting off to the side of the chair. We won't talk about that either. So we're gonna continue on here a little bit more. You'll see me put in a lot more darker shades, pulling forward some of the objects, separating them out, and it really has that effect of separating the objects from each other and making the scene look more believable as certain things jump out at you and other details kind of fade away a bit. And then we'll start throwing some additional characters or tables. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do in the background as yet, so we'll get into that. Okay, as you can see, we are starting to employ a lot of the techniques and key things that we talked about in the previous section. We have line weight, we have size, we have overlaps, we have detail. We're kind of trying to keep everything in line towards a vanishing point. Again, doing this just based on the first object I put down. If you noticed, um, if you draw a line through all of the chair handles, you kind of get them all lined up a little bit. So some of the things there, one of the takeaways here is that there is a lot going on in these scenes. Um, when you look at the oval here versus the oval here, this one is further back away from the viewpoint. So again, the oval here needs to be even narrower or more squished than the ones up front here. The same thing with the table, kind of have this kind of oval going on here. It's more squished into this type of oval. You can also see further under the table because it is really flattening out. Remember, in terms of the angles, the closer things get to you, the more the face turns up as if you're looking down on top of it, and the further they are away from you, the more you can actually see the side view of them. So the further you get out here, you eventually get to the point where you're kind of drawing a table almost from side on view if you go far enough back into the horizon. So that's something to keep in mind. We're probably going to be making this slightly darker because I'm just going to put something else even further back on this side with less detail, and we'll get to the point where we'll wrap this up. So I think you get the basic idea of the process that I go through in terms of creating these scenes. This one particularly did not turn out quite as well as some of the others I have done. That's probably due to the pressure of drawing and recording yourself at the same time. For some reason, I always tend to rush quite a bit and be quite nervous when I am recording myself. But I do think this gave you an overview of the process that we go through for drawing these scenes, at least the process that I go through. It is a complicated thing. There are just so many things that you're trying to keep in mind at the same time. As I switch over into my new sketchbook, which I already have purchased, it will do a little bit better with inks and trying to get in some uh, shadow and value mapping to get some shadows in there. So I look forward to that. I'm almost done with this sketchbook here and looking forward to even adding more to my images. But I'm going to continue doing these scenes more and more, eventually being able to convert them into more believable characters or more real life characters. And so I'm really excited about the learning. It is slow. I don't have a lot of time to commit to it, but I do see progress. So I'm really excited about it and hope you got something from this video. If you've made it this far, thank you and glad that you're on this journey with me.